I wanted to take a minute to make a short little video about Varroa mite management and sustainability in that practice. And I wanted to utilize Randy Oliver's 2018 update to Randy's Varroa model to demonstrate graphically for the folks that are employing this strategy. And it doesn't apply to all beekeepers. It certainly doesn't apply to the more seasoned hobby beekeeper who has a comprehensive program dialed in that's been working for them for many years. And it certainly doesn't likely apply on a broader scale to commercial beekeepers as well. So take me with a grain of salt. The audience that I'm speaking to here might not be the majority, or it may be the majority. What's kind of driving me to make this video on this topic, utilizing Randy's model, is a number of recent conversations that I've had with hobby beekeepers from my area, and so here in southwestern New Brunswick, we are considered to be high latitude beekeepers. So if this practice that I'm referring to is as common as it is in this area, I'm assuming, and I think it would be a safe assumption, that it's also probably being employed in other high latitude regions of the world. And the practice that I'm referring to is the one and done high efficacy synthetic miticide strips going in at when the honey supers come off in the fall, and that is the exclusive Varroa mite management tool being employed. And I think it's happening on a fairly large scale, and for good reason. It's easy to implement, and by and large it knocks Varroa mite levels down in the colonies below the economic threshold at the time of year when you need them knocked down. So it's easy to implement, and it appears to be doing the job for people. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. But one of the tools that we now have available thanks to the work of Randy Oliver, and it's an enormous amount of work. If anybody hasn't already taken advantage of Randy's Varroa model, it's a free download on his website, and he's also been kind enough to put 4 tutorial videos together on how to utilize this model to get precision in your operation. And one of the things that a few things annoy me, obviously, like like everybody else. But one of the things that really frustrates me is about beekeeping is it always seems to be a struggle to gain precision. It's one of the things that frustrates me about beekeeping, but it's one of the things that also really attracts me to the practice of beekeeping. And so I think just kind of playing around with this model over the last little while, I really feel like that this tool, it's huge what it enables you to do, being able to put basic inputs in on mite strategies, and to be able to watch graphically what results that's going to produce for you over the long term. It's a bit of a game changer. There's no question. There's a ton of value in it, and I do believe that it's usable enough for anybody, regardless of your computer skill level, to download this tool, watch Randy's tutorials, and take full advantage of the enormous amount of work that this man's done to make this available. So I'm not going to ramble on too much here. I'm going to go to a screenshot, and we're going to walk through some scenarios. And what I'd like to be able to demonstrate is with that one and done high efficacy miticide in the fall, what happens to the mite pressure build up in your operation over the course of a few seasons. And I'd also like to talk about some of the new literature, some of it new, some of it old, just not widely recognized literature that would also highlight the fact that strategy might not be the best over the long term. Okay, so here we are. This is the model. So the recommended setting here is to put this down on 90%. I don't want to spend too much time on the functionality, although I will go over a couple of the basic parameters. Again, Randy has put four tutorial videos together on how to use this properly. So I'm going to leave that to him. But I do have Colony B selected here. What's really interesting to note about Colony B? So he has a number of templates. Colony settings that you can pick from, and what's really interesting about Colony B is that is a high latitude colony, short summer, long winter brood break. I want to talk about this a little bit maybe later on in the video. I'm going to try not to get too dug in on these points because I will make a separate video to discuss this in detail. But, however, Randy made this colony bee model off of data from New Brunswick, Canada. So how convenient is that for us New Brunswick beekeepers? I thought that was kind of cool. He does have kind of the base or the default starting mite level set at 100. So that's 100 total mites in your hive. And just for a reference point for somebody who might not be aware, that's an alcohol wash of approximately, it's in the 2 sample range on a half a cup of bees. So there's one note here that I did want to read off to you quickly. So tweak your starting mite count until your early season alcohol wash count matches that of your simulation on the same day. So try 100 to start with. So the important note here is that make sure that you adjust the starting mite count to match the reality check by alcohol wash median values during any time period that you've taken actual field samples. So we'll start out here with the default number of 100 mites in the hive to start out the season, just for the purpose of simplicity. But you can go out into the field in the spring, download this model, go out in the field in the spring, your first alcohol wash, and you tweak this number until it matches up with your alcohol wash sample value, so you can get absolute precision using this model, referencing your field data. So I think that's pretty useful. The mite immigration value is set at 2, and again, I'm not going to get too into the detail here, but 1 or 2 is typical for managed apiaries, 3 or 4 if surrounded by poorly managed apiaries. So I think we can all probably select 3 or 4 here in reality, but again, we'll leave it on the default settings. So colony B, starting mite level of 100 in the colony, and a mite immigration value of 2. So I've left this without treatments being applied. So here's where you actually input your treatments. So it's broken down into January 1, January 15, Feb 1, Feb 15, and it runs through the year in that manner. Over on this side here is the legend of efficacy for the available miticides or acaricides. So I think that's pretty well laid out. It does look pretty busy, but again, the inputs that you actually have to input to make this functional are fairly minimal. So I think it's very user friendly. So 100 mites, alcohol wash of 2. You run that out over the season. Mites are rapidly building up in your colony, and they spike until your colony crashes. So you need to treat for mites. I think I really don't need to say that again. I think we can all agree on that. Now, treatment, timing, schedule, types, those things are all up for debate, and I certainly don't want to enter that discussion. I'm certainly not trying to tell people how to treat for mites here. I just want to demonstrate some of the pitfalls of a more common new entry strategy. So I think given our area with the with the later asters, goldenrod, and then other asters, it's probably most common that around mid to late September the honey supers are coming off, and again with the high efficacy synthetic miticide being put in as the one and done treatment. So we'll drop that treatment in there around September 15th. I would go a little bit later if it was an option. I think October 1st might be a little later than most people would put it in, so I think that's the best option. You can see what happens to that crashed colony. You've saved the day by dropping those strips in. So that's a 95% kill of those mites, and you've dropped that mite load down below the economic threshold, and that is manageable to a certain degree. Now, I managed mites for a number of years to that number, to the economic threshold. And the problem I was always getting into is that, the buildup of the mites is just so, when you leave this many leftover or residual mites in your colony through the winter, the buildup, the following season, it can easily get out of hand, and you really need to be on your game with alcohol washes to stay on top of things. And I don't think it's extremely common. I know that it's not extremely common for a lot of beekeepers, regardless of experience, to be conducting scheduled, to have an alcohol wash program dialed in, and it really is necessary. At the end of the day, if Varroa mite management isn't taken seriously, you're going to lose colonies. And possibly all of them. It's a very, very common story in the discussions that I have with beekeepers that, I lost all my colonies this year, and I did everything the same. I was doing what I had success with for a number of years, and I don't know what happened. And one of my first questions are, what were your mite samples coming back like, in July? And the answer is never a number. It's I this, and it really, just straight up, but take me with a grain of salt. If you're not sampling for mites, it's going to bite you. So I'll try not to get too dug in on that, but please sample for your mites. So 95% efficacy miticide gets dropped in here. This residual mite load, so I wanted to talk about two areas. One, this residual mite load and the effects that it has on this area the following season, and then the following season. But I also wanted to talk about this spike here, and what that does to your bees, the nest that is being prepared for winter. And also what this residual mite load does to the nest that is actually wintering. So if you run this strategy out, I just want to show you what happens to this strategy over the course of a few seasons. So the key note here is that the starting mite count is 100, and the ending mite count is 188. So it's gone up. You've put the strips in, 95% kill, but the mite load is still higher at the end of the season than it was at the beginning of the season. So you can imagine what happens when you run that 188. So we're going to start the next season out with 188. It's actually higher than that, and I'll try not to expand too much on that because I want to make a separate video about winter brood rearing. But logically, we'll just assume that the starting mite count is around 188 for the following season, and you can see see everything spiked up here a little bit. So your mite load through the year has gone up, and so you drop the strips in again. 95% kill, you end up with 217 mites from the original 100, but from 188 at the beginning of that season. You start out the next year at 217, and then everything spikes up. So this whole baseline is rising, and this spike is rising, this residual is rising. So 227 is your ending mite load. So I've ran through this scenario a few times. So one more season and this will hit equilibrium, and that's at 231 mites. So when you start with 231, you actually end with 231. So by definition here, you're managing below the economic threshold. You're managing below the economic threshold in terms of preventing the colony from crashing. I guess one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is what makes beekeeping enjoyable is not only being able to enjoy your bees through the summer and not lose them through the winter, but also not having to have panicky schedules where everything is super critical timing, and that in my opinion that's really been the focus of the management strategy that I'm trying to develop is I'm always looking for ways to give myself an insurance policy, and that insurance policy doesn't have dollar values backing it up. It has time backing it up. I want time in my decision making, and I think it's really important to set ourselves up for that. So what this elevated mite load does over the course of a few seasons is it puts you in a situation where it becomes absolutely critical, the timing of this miticide application. So so September 15th, that's kind of been our time to put it in, and maybe it's a little bit later than that. Maybe it's typically a little bit earlier, but the point remains valid. If you become busy after a few seasons of letting that mite level, that mite pressure build up in your operation or your hobby, and you miss that normally scheduled treatment by even just a few weeks, this is what I wanted you to see graphically, is that it becomes too late for that colony. The viral levels from the Varroa infestation have become critical, and that colony will crash. So if you're just trying to enjoy your bees and have some fun with them, or you're trying to make money with your bees, that's not an ideal scenario. So I guess one of the advantages that we have in this area is the fact that our colonies. So I'm just going to go back in and put that back on the 15th of September. So one of the advantages that we have being high latitude beekeepers is the month of November. The month of November, based on, like, I'm really trying to dig through everything that's available for literature right now on two things really: the thermoregulatory processes inside a wintering colony of Apis mellifera, and winter brood rearing. And those two things go hand in hand. And there's also mounting research evidence that the level of Varroa infestation directly impacts thermoregulatory ability of a wintering colony. And if a colony can't thermoregulate properly in the winter, it's not going to be able to rear the amount of brood that it would normally be able to rear as well. So you end up with weaker colonies in the spring. So that's one point. And again, I'm going to try to stay on point here, but I will make a separate video talking about that, because there's a bunch of meat there. There's a bunch of stuff to dig in on winter brood rearing. The causal link that's been identified between Varroa infestation and impaired ability to thermoregulate inside a wintering nest, and I do want to spend some time on that in a separate video, but we'll leave that aside for now. But also, this is critical to talk about here as well. So in terms of overall performance for your colony the following year, you need to set it up for success in this time period. So with this one and done strategy over the course of 2 to 3 seasons, and it may only be one season, it really and it may be 5 or 6, it really just depends. I doubt that it would be that long. 4 I think would be the max, but it really depends on this starting mite level. Let's go back in here and put this out at the baseline. Really depends on that. It really depends on that starting mite level. Actually, let's leave that in there at 231. So once you've achieved this over a few seasons, in the fall, so late summer, fall, it's important to understand what you're trying to achieve by setting up a winter nest. And there's a number of things there that could be talked about, but I really just want to focus on the viral level buildup inside the colony. So we're on a 21 day brood cycle, and if you take 21 days back from this and 21 days back from this, so you want to be, in order to have virus-free, healthy bees going into the winter, you need to take care of the bees that are taking care of the bees that are going into winter. And that's the important thing to understand here. So your Varroa mite curve needs to be managed, in my opinion, back here in July. This is the late, like, I've been really trying to get the most out of my colonies. I want them to be rock stars. Like, I want top performers, and this is absolutely critical to achieve that the following season. Not just getting them through the winter. I don't want 2 or 3 frames of bees in a colony that's going to take till the end of May before it's even looking like it's going to survive. That's no good whether you're trying to have fun with them, or no good whether you're trying to make splits or nukes or honey or whatever your agenda is in beekeeping. That's no good. So I really do feel like this needs to be given. This needs to have great attention applied to it. So just remember that concept is that again, there's a 21-day brood cycle, which you're all aware of, but it's just banging this mite level down here. These bees that are going into the winter are already infested with Varroa and viruses. They were raised with Varroa in their cells. So they're damaged bees. You're taking viral loads into the winter. Just remember that concept. Take care of the bees that are taking care of the bees that are going into winter. So you want those mite loads really low here. So your colonies are by and large virus free while those 2 brood cycles are being reared. So those brood, and again, feeding protein supplement in this time period, in my belief, like I'm a big believer in honeybee nutrition. Most of the research that I do or have done over the last 8 years or so in honeybees has been almost exclusively on honeybee nutrition and pathogen control, and I guess both of those mingled into one management strategy. It's really key. You can get a lot more out of your colony when those things are focused on. So what do you do? So say you look at this information, you agree that the mite load should be managed back here, a little bit closer to late summer than later in the fall, and you've read the available literature and you agree that this residual mite load through the winter probably isn't the best thing to produce optimal results the following season, and you don't want to let this mite load get to a point where the timing of this becomes super critical, because you know that your life has other commitments and you're bound to be a little late eventually, and you don't want your colonies to die or your colony to die because of that. So say that you're convinced and you'd like another option, and I'm not going to suggest anything here that you haven't heard of, but I wanted to be able to use this graph to demonstrate how effective it can be. So I took that out. I should have left it in. So say your timing was on. Let's go back down to the starting mite levels here. So again, started with 100, high efficacy miticide, honey supers are off, you end up with 188 mites. Now, to remove this residual, to make sure that your bees are able to properly thermoregulate and they're also able to properly start ramping up brood production again after the winter solstice. It's actually a little bit earlier than that, apparently so. And you would like to get this curve pushed back here somewhere. So if you want to achieve those things, I think and you want to still maintain this strategy, and I'm not trying to convince anybody to stop doing this. What I'd like to suggest or propose, the proposition would be to consider an oxalic acid sublimation anywhere between the 15th of October and the 1st of November appears. And again, I'm trying to be thorough, digging through the available literature, and for all intents and purposes, the month of November seems to be the best opportunity to get the most mites in the phoretic stage, and that's where oxalic acid vapor becomes truly effective, and you can get up to 95% efficacy. It's all depending on the stage of the mite and its life cycle. If they're phoretic, it kills them. So say it's November 1st, we go in with a 95% effective oxalic acid sublimation treatment. So what you've just achieved there, you can see you've dropped these down. Your alcohol washes are non-detectable, and what that does in here, in terms of your bees are better able to thermoregulate through the winter months. Arguably, they'll be better able to kick off that late winter brood rearing that the spring nest is so dependent on. But what you've also done is you're relieving this pressure in your operation. So we started out with 100 mites, and we ended up with 9. So this summer buildup, starting from 100 mites, has built up to this level. You've killed 95% of that level, and then you wait till the true broodless period of your colony, and then you kill 95% of the remainder of that 95% kill. And that's the key here, is that you've killed 95% of the overall, and then you kill 95% of the remainder. And that's where you really start to see those mite loads dropping down to where they're truly sustainable. So we've ended with 9. Let's drop that in to begin the next year out. You can see what you're able to achieve here: non-detectable mite levels through most of the year, and this curve is nice. This is pushing this curve back, and it's not nowhere near as aggressive. So you're going to be going in, your bees that are raising the bees that are raising the bees that are going into winter are going to be dramatically more. You're going to have dramatically less virus to contend with, meaning they'll be healthier. And if you're feeding them a protein supplement, they'll arguably be able to stay out of their pollen stores from the summer, and they'll have adequate pollen stores to be able to engage in late winter brood rearing activities. And you should have nice, robust colonies in the spring, by and large. So you've achieved a number of things. You're achieving greater ability of that wintering nest to conduct their thermal processes through the winter months, and you're making sure that those bees are nice and healthy by not having that spike at the wrong time of the year. And you've also regained yourself, or recaptured the flexibility in this operation, because with non-detectable mite levels in mid to late July, if you're off on putting your strips in by a week or so, it becomes a very the criticality of the timing becomes dramatically reduced. Is a complicated way of saying it, I suppose, but you get your time back, and that's a big thing. You want an enjoyable hobby. It's all about having some flexibility in that. It's no fun if it's this super stressful thing where your colonies are dying all the time, and you got to be there, or things are going to go sideways. This is one strategy that you can employ. This was the whole intent of me making this video, is that I think that for the folks that are using this treatment, for a couple $100 to get yourself kitted up properly, and I think, and in these devices, the hot plates last for forever and ever, to just go out into your backyard, into the field, wherever you've got your colonies, and give them a treatment around this time period, and you gain so much value. Healthier bees going into winter, healthier bees going through the winter, bigger, stronger colonies coming out of winter, and you maintain your flexibility around this time period in terms of getting your honey supers off. So that was it. That's what I wanted to show you. It's some food for thought.
Okay, so we're on location here, top secret location, bee yard. Fletcher Colpitts was kind enough to give a demonstration here of how he treats for mites appropriately at this time of year. One of the things that I was kind of bugging Fletcher a little bit to let me make this video. One of the things I've been trying to do is get a little bit more efficiency out of my mite treatments, which is why I've been kind of testing out the ProVap 110 so far. I'm not going to get into that here, but in a later video we'll kind of get to the bottom of why that's not working. This system here does work, however, and if you look how many of these he has going at one time, he's treating 6 colonies at one time here, and here's his setup. So deep cycle battery. He's got his plug-in ports on the front. Wheels that around. So these ones are being treated right now. And he's prepping the next bunch of hives. So this is a pretty good setup when you actually do the math and subtract down from the 20-30 seconds a hive that we're getting with the ProVap 110. The timing is actually right about the same. The main difference is that this is a proven method. These tools do work. So I think moving forward until I get a little bit more convinced of what's going on with the ProVap, this is the way that I'm going to be moving forward. Pretty good little setup. 6 hives at once. I like it.